trying to dismiss it, you know. And the more I became obsessed with trying to get rid of it. So wherever I went, it would follow me. For quite a few days, I just, you know, I was sitting, standing, walking, lying down, name would come. And then I tried to analyze it. What does this have significant message for me? Have I ever known anyone named Gwendolyn or no like that? Analyze it and then try to get rid of it, and then the insight came just one day that I was clinging, you know, just my very resistance and trying to get rid of it was the problem. Once I saw that, and it dropped away. You know, could you it's like you know, trying to make sense of it, trying to analyze it, trying to get rid of it, and all that led to an obsession with it. When all I, you know, and it became so intense, you know, that finally it broke, and I saw what I was doing. Trying to get rid of something I didn't like. And which it was like, even though that was, you know, it wasn't anything significant in itself, you know, the name or anything, but it pointed to a tendency, a character tendency that I have of resisting things. And, you know, trying to control and resist and fight against things I don't like, and which is seen, you know, on a cultural level. you know, that's what, like Americans, what we do. We try to, you know, get rid of the bad and hold on to the good. And you're brought up as a Christian, you resist evil and temptation, and you know, so your kind of cultural conditioning is very, you know, trying to hold on to the good and resist, get rid of the bad. And I had this incredible will to resist things. And that it came around something that was quite silly, you know. It wasn't like an evil thought or, you know, being tempted out of the robe or anything wicked. It's just stupid. So I was quite grateful for that. You know.
What about something like emotions or desires? If you have like you know, suddenly come across you feeling some kind of sadness appear when you do meditation, but you know, will you just see this feeling of sadness or your desire just like how you see the name of Gwendolyn?
Yeah. It's like when the conditions arise, you know, it's the BuddhaBodhivana. When conditions arise, then this is the result. So, you know, I reflected on that. Sometimes, you know, that whatever, you know, you're sitting in meditation, certain emotions will arise, and then all you need to do is just recognize it is what it is. Where as long as the Sakya Ditti, the first fetter, is so strong, you know, you're always seeing it in terms of some kind of personal relationship of good, bad, right, wrong. So you know, then you react in your own kind of conditioned way to it. You know, like resistance. If you don't like it, you want to push it away, suppress it, or if it's what you like, then you try to hold on to it and keep trying to get it back when it goes. But then, and throughout one's life, certain conditions come together that where you feel a certain way. And that's like vipaka karma, or, the result of karma of being born and our own kind of karma we've made in this form. And as when the conditions for that vipaka to come, then they come. And then the awareness of that, of the vipaka, is all that's necessary, rather than in analyzing it, or any attempt to define it, analyze it, like it or dislike it, then creates more karma with it. And so you create more vipaka karma. But through awareness, then you know that it is something that has arisen already, and then you just let it be what it is, and then it will naturally cease. It's a way to resolve vipaka karma without, and so you're not making more karma with it. Like the thinking mind, like the biggest problem with Western Buddhists is we're so identified with our thinking process, with reason and logic, and when you really look at that, it's it's very dualistic. It's a critical function of the mind. So you see things that this is good, and if always good, always there's bad. If there's heaven, there's hell, and there's right, then there has to be wrong, true, and it has to be false, and so you're stuck in this conditioned way of the thinking process, and this is very difficult to transcend for most. Like in England, for example, we're so identified with ideas and ideals and thoughts and views and views about ourselves, or cultural assumptions, and so people go to psychotherapists and do all kinds of things to try to figure it out. Why I'm so unhappy, or why I feel so depressed or anxious, and because they see it always, everything is interpreted in these personal, with the critical mind, with the sense of this is a fault with me, something wrong with me, and then like the first three fetters in the 10 fetters, the first three fetters, the stream entry, are all the cultural conditioning that one has acquired. They're human-made artificial conditions. When you think of Sakkaya Ditthi, it's like the ego sense of yourself as this is my body and my opinion, and the ego is, and then you define yourself as being a good person, bad person, or through some value judgment. And then Sila BuddhaBodhivana, I translate that as like cultural, social conditioning, because like we've come from different cultural backgrounds, and it's something like living in Thailand, for example, when training with Luang Por Chah, I was living in a totally different culture, and the assumptions and cultural attitudes were so different from the American ones. And yet one, this is, but cultural conditioning is acquired. You're not born thinking I'm an American or a Thai, and the Ethan has its own cultural biases and attitudes and prejudices and assumptions. It's like any culture will have that. It's social identities, status in the society, gender identities, and all these things are conditioned into us. And then the third fetter is vicikiccha, which is doubt, which always means the attachment to thinking, because the thinking process, you never can be liberated through thinking, and it always ends up with doubt, never being quite sure, so this, when you examine those three fetters, it's not to suppress them, but to recognize them, so you really can get very clear kind of perspective on the Sakya Ditti, and that's the biggest one, the first. That's why it's the first one, because it's such a strong sense of separate. I'm this person. I'm a separate person. I'm this body, and then all the identities that you acquire from what you get from your parent, from your mother and father, and your peers and the religion you grew up with and everything, well, is conditioned. And then when you really contemplate, like pure consciousness, say, isn't conditioned through culture. But what is conditioned through culture is identity with the body and with the emotion, and cultural conditioning with thoughts, with memories. You think you have memories of the past, and it creates a sense of I did this and I was, the things I've done or shouldn't have done in the past, and that's why people are so neurotic. It's like people are so kind of imprisoned with their separateness. And then, like, the American conditioning makes you very separate. It's all about me as a, I'm important, what I think, what I want, and it's very strong, the kind of sense of reinforcement of the ego as a separate, but it leads to, it leads to a kind of isolation, because it's hard to relate to others very well if you're always obsessed with yourself. And in the monastic form, it's not about personality anymore, but about Buddha Dhamma Sangha. You're taking language, like Pali language, and then using these more, not to attach to thinking, making an ego around I take refuge in Buddha Dhamma Sangha as some kind of personal grasping, but it's a reference point of mindfulness and truth, the Dhamma reality, and in right practice, which is impersonal. It's not about how well I practice or how bad I practice, because then it goes back into the ego again. And then, and then after that, then you're dealing with, like the stream entry point. That gives you the clear vision of the path, of awareness. It's just very, very accurate, and it's beyond doubt, because you're no longer caught in these three fetters. But then, the Sakadakam, is still, you still have raga and anger, sexual desire and anger. But these are natural conditions that come with this form, so that like sexual desire, is so highly identified and personally judged in the West, like Americans and Europeans. They just, you're so, my sexual problems or it becomes a highly personal identity, and anger also is like, I'm an angry person because I was abused when I was young or something. So you kind of see anger and sexuality always interpreted through the first three fetters. Once those are kind of seen through and relinquished, then those forces, because they're energies that animals have, dogs get angry. I mean, with sexual desire, none of us would be here if it wasn't for that. It's what keeps the species going. The procreative energy of these bodies, these sexual bodies, and then the sense realm, like we're living in this realm with a human form that's sensitive in a realm that's always impinging on us in some pleasant or unpleasant way. Now the way out of that, of course, is mindfulness, because you're not trying to find a kind of sterile vault of where you don't feel anything and don't see anything, but within this form and within the condition we find ourselves, the mindfulness is a way that we can investigate and get beyond and break through the delusions we have around the ego and the conditioning of the mind through culture, through attachment to thoughts and ideas, and then through and then more and more you begin to see like we're brahmacharya, celibate order. So we choose to live this life so that we can reflect on sexual energy, no longer see it in terms of personal, as good, bad, or judged as, pure, impure, but to recognize the power of this realm that we're living in, and the power of the male body as it affects us, and then anger, aversion, fear. These are kind of primal emotions to this realm, to the animal realm, and but because the human being, he can actually, like the Buddha, this is what his teaching's about, is pointing to the way out, the way to learn. We have to learn from this condition. Where, say, a dog or cat, we share a common karma with them, a mammalian karma, but they can't reflect on when they get angry, they become total anger, or sexual desire, they become totally obsessed with that. But with us, we have this ability to recognize, like you say, I feel anger, and then so something conditions say arise to anger arises in my mind. I'm aware of it. And then if I just interpret it in terms of cultural conditioning or personality, then it's always judged as I shouldn't hate people, I shouldn't be angry, or I can get into really believing the person I'm angry with is terrible, and I get into revenge or whatever. But I can also, before that kind of complication takes place, recognize angers like this, or sexual desires like this. That which is aware is not that. It's not like the awareness is not sexual. The actual energy might be, but the awareness isn't, and the awareness of anger is not angry. So you begin to discern the difference with awareness and the object of awareness. And that's where, like the Four Noble Truths, you use that as a kind of way of helping yourself to learn, to discern and develop discernment, wisdom in your. Because this is a gift of the human birth, is that you can actually, we aren't just helpless victims of our conditioning. We can actually, we have to learn from it, whatever we've experienced. It doesn't deny the kind of that some people were badly treated, and we're not trying to just pass it off, but also to not let that when people that always feel like victims are blaming the fact that they were abused and they were never given a decent opportunity and so forth. Where what the Buddha is saying is actually, no matter how the world has treated us, this awakened ability of a human individual is the way out of dukkha. So this you have to prove for yourself. But over the years, it really, it really works. For me, it's just, over 40 years, I put it to the test in my life. And I've been given a lot of challenges. Narcissism doesn't particularly make life easier.
I have a very simple question just about Paccaya. I'd like to see your insight, how you would contemplate it when you have it in forward and reverse order, from where it starts off with Sankhara, Paccaya Viññāna, Viññāna Paccaya Nama Rupa, Nama Rupa Paccaya Salayatana, Salayatana Paccaya Pasu, contact, and then the six sense base, so forth. And then Asevana, when it's reversed, Sankhara, Nirodha, Viññāna, Viññāna Nirodha, Nama Rupa Nirodha, Salayatana, so forth. It sort of reverses itself. How would you contemplate that, or understand it, define it in your own sort of language of awareness? Well, sometimes I think the order is wrong, just my way of thinking, because consciousness seems to be apparent first for me. That's what confused me, so I'd like to see how other person thinks about it. My opinion.
Small question.
Well, it starts with avijja, ignorance.
Oh, sorry, avijja, sorry, yes.
Yeah. So as long as there is ignorance of Dhamma,
okay,
then that affects everything, It's just how your thinking, your actions and speech, which always lead to end up as dukkha. So that side of it, like in ignorance of the truth, affects sankhara, bhajya sankhara, and then so that means that the sankhara is this realm, the world around you, your body and your conditioning, your views, opinions, and emotional habits. And I mean, so it just means it's a general statement of avijja, bhajya, sankhara, and then sankhara, bhajya, viññāna. So when viññāna then is affected by, we experience, even though consciousness doesn't come out of ignorance, yet it's affected by ignorance. We project into, we have consciousness, but then we always putting into our consciousness these ignorant things like sakya, ditthi, and ignorance, and that affects nama rupa salayatana, pasavedana, and it leads into grief, sorrow, despair, and anguish, old age, sickness, and death. So, and then the other side is once Ignorance is out. Now, ignorance, avijja, mindfulness gets you out of avijja. So this is where in that nirodha side of it, wherever you catch yourself, and you get caught into with your ignorance and emotions and whatnot, that point of awareness where you suddenly see it, that's the cessation of ignorance. But it's not, because on one level, when I first tried to understand Paticca Samuppada, it just seemed like the nirodha side was an annihilation process, annihilating consciousness. And because it's not a sequence, it's not an intellectual sequence. It's what they call simultaneous arising. But the thinking process always has to move from one word to the next, So the thinking process is sequential, and so you can have only one thought moment at a time. You can't think two thoughts at the same moment. But you can be aware of everything at the same moment. Like awareness, includes everything. But when you are attached to thinking, then you divide everything up. So say like sitting here, I'm looking at you, you're looking at me, and we seem very separate. And then I'm Ajahn Sumedho, you're Bhikkhu Gatapunyo, and we see that you're Australian and I'm American. These are the separate, defining our separation. When we stop doing that, then there's pure consciousness, which isn't Sumedho or Gatapunyo. But then on a conventional level, we use these words, and that, when in Thai, like Rinpoche used to call, what is it, Paramatta Satcha and Samuti Satcha, the Samuti Satcha is a kind of conventional truth. So it's not like you have to stop thinking, get rid of thinking and annihilate desire and clinging, but because this realm is a desire realm, the body is a desire form, and the sense realm is about being attracted and averse through the sight, through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body. So you're constantly living in this sensual sense stimulation, sense irritation. And just it's not about finding a place where you don't experience any sensory contact, but through awareness you can no longer be deluded by it. So when avijja, this is my insight, avijja, vajja, sankhara, then this empty point, this awareness, there's no avijja, so the thing doesn't happen. And then I'm not mindful, and they say Ajahn Sumedho is a horrible monk, and he go there, and then I get caught up in anger. And then there's avijja, vajja, sankhara, sangha, vajja. But then, maybe, because I've been practicing for a long time, then I suddenly catch myself, see, anger is like this. That's the cessation. That's the nirodha at that moment. And then you begin to recognize, like the Third Noble Truth about recognizing cessation, realizing its reality. Cessation is real. It's not kind of a theoretical cessation of feeling or ignorance, but it's a fact. It's real. It's not, and it's not personal.
Okay, so you're saying the misunderstanding is that it's a format used for investigation, but you can say consciousness is always there. It's just put in a certain order to explain the process that's going on. How it's been tainted, the consciousness has been tainted.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Well, like the first three fetters, for example. Like a newborn baby, before it's conditioned to have an ego or cultural identity or thinking, it's conscious form. So it's a human body and it consciousness, and then it has kind of instinctual intelligence. So when it's hungry, it lets you know. And it's not about kilesa or personal defilements or cultural values. It's just like in Thai, tamachat, natural. And then once you're born, then the baby is conditioned. You're a boy. You're not a girl. Boys should be like this. And then you're identified with a class, with a group, with a family, with a race, with... you pick up your mother's feelings, and attitudes and assumptions of the family. Because you're just acquiring, like a baby doesn't discern, it just, like a sponge, absorbs whatever is coming towards it. And so... and then I think in teenage, I think your personality becomes kind of fixed. Because I've noticed in my life, so much of my emotions are, emotional habits were kind of fixed. They're still like teenage emotions. Which, it's a bit of a surprise, because you think you mature and grow up, and then you realize that a lot of you play roles. Once you don't have the you try to act like a mature man when you're in your 20s and things like that, and do what men are supposed to do, and women do that. What women are supposed to do to fit the role models of the society. But when you really look at emotions, they aren't all that different than what I noticed that the teenage, late teens, you become so, because that's a painful time for most of us. Because you're so concerned about how you look in the society, and obsessed with yourself as as being acceptable, liked, disliked, or whatever. And because of the self-consciousness, isn't it, very strong then, and comparing yourself with others. And I think with cultures that would vary, the American one is very competitive. My generation anyway was very competitive about how what you should be like, and not be in something that makes people that people criticize or make fun of. So conformity and being, fitting into roles, and emotions around that. Then by the time I was 30, I was so unhappy still that I thought the only possibility was through meditation, getting out of the trap, because I felt I was just trapped in a very unpleasant habits, ways of thinking about myself and seeing the world. Felt imprisoned by it. Yeah, so teacher Samapada, I really, I practiced with that as a meditation for about 2 years till I really had the insight. Because when I first read it, I couldn't figure it out actually. You know, that sequence of, like you were saying, it doesn't, you know, it didn't, you know, I kind of had to twist my intellect with it, and I didn't quite get it. But then in like Buddhadasa, they translated one of his books on Paticcasamuppada into English, and it wasn't very clear actually, but at least it was the beginning to kind of look at it in a different way, because you know, the assumption of a three life, then it becomes more of a theoretical, it becomes more theory than practical, because you know, where the simultaneous arising fits in with the Dhamma, you know, the Buddha, because it's about here and now. And this is, the Buddha was, you know, in the scriptures was enlightened at the time he was contemplating Paticcasamuppada. But if he was contemplating previous lives in the future, that's about time. And this is about timelessness, akalika Dhamma, you know, akaliko. And it's, and so, you know, you can't, timelessness, I mean, thinking is about time. You know, so you have tomorrow and yesterday. But mindfulness is timeless. But, you know, it's akalika, santitiko, akaliko, ehipasko, panayiko. And, you know, you chant it every day. And how do you, and you can't think about timelessness. Try to conceive timelessness with ideas or thoughts or theories. You can't. You know, it's just, you know, it's beyond thinking. But it's so the only way to realize the timeless is awareness. So like in the Buddha's teaching, he's saying, mindfulness is the path to the deathless. And he's, you know, the here and now, awaken here and now, awaken attention in the present, then anatta, like nibbana, all these words, non-self, nibbana, shunyata, emptiness, unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. These are inconceivable. You know, they have no images, or icons, or colors, or qualities. You know, they're not. You can't think of them, or create images like they're unconditioned. You can create a condition. You know, it's like this and it's red or something, but the unconditioned, your thinking mind stops. You can't conceive it. But you can recognize it, and that's what this intuitive awareness is about. It's something we use, but we don't recognize, or in the culture, it's not valued or raised up in any way. It's almost ignored, because the modern society is all about ideals and you know, being reasonable, logical, sensible. You know, we rate logic and reason as the highest human attainment, really. But so much of a person's experience is not reasonable, is it? Like, your emotions are never very reasonable. You know, so you tend to judge them. You know, that's stupid and being unreasonable, or you know, so because your emotions are what they are, and then your intellect can be based on, this is immature or stupid, and that's a judgment because it's unreasonable, it's nonsensical. But in terms of awareness, when you feel anger or jealousy or fear or whatever, you feel it, and it's not imagined, but it arises and ceases. And then with awareness, then you don't grasp it anymore. You no longer, you've had the insight, say, into Nirodha, where you're not grasping. So then a famous scholar in Thailand, Payuto, Tanjakun Prompunapon, he has always starts out with these, he's given these royal titles, and he keeps getting the new one. So it's hard to keep up with his royal titles. But he used, I think on his books now, in English they use Payuto, don't they? Because that's his Pali name. And he wrote this excellent treatise called BuddhaBodhivana, a very thick book in Thai, and people have tried to translate some of it. And Bruce Evans, Borisov, who's supposed to be coming to see me, lives in Melbourne. Yeah, so he tried, when he was a monk, he translated some of Prabhupada's and the Paticca Samuppada part he did, and they published it in English, and that I found very good. Because because Prabhupada is a real scholar, and so he's very very intelligent, and he's also he's very well educated. And so you feel, his understanding of Dhamma is quite trustworthy. But it is, not many people know how to use Paticca Samuppada.
So it's correct in any given session, say for example when you visit lay people and you see how they behave compared to Sangha, how Sangha behave, and sort of like etiquette and their style of life. When they're in a conversation, they're just laughing, joking. They seem so lost in it. They seem so absorbed in it. You see them playing power games with personality. You see them. They've got this view. I'm me. I have to have this way. And sort of when you Sangha, you just see this. It's all related through Dhamma Vinaya. We first feel to our experience and relate it to the Dhamma Vinaya. So it gives a break. Notice that. And because of that, when I visit home, I try to encourage my family to meditate, and I had a struggle because they're not really interested, so I use the sixth sense base. And I remember my brother just dropping me off, and the rain, because I've noticed this lately, the last year or so, there always seems to be a part in my mind that doesn't trust any given situation, what I'm feeling, what's been thrown at me, it doesn't trust it. And so what that part of it doesn't trust, it doesn't go into sankhara, or because of this, because of it, doesn't try to intellectualize it, because it just exhausted me, because I used to do that, and it just mentally exhausted me, because it just create more problems. So then I just went to the sixth sense base, and I just got pity. Started just if I hit a bird, because I just couldn't be bothered anymore with this sankhara formations anymore, I just threw it in the bin, like when Pauline said, just throw it in the bin.
Yes.
Gave me simple advice, just throw it all in the bin. So I just use that, comes up, throw it in the bin, and what was there was just sixth sense base, just the pure awareness of a bird or the rain. And more and more I noticed, Ajahn, Like that moment, my brother was very angry, and I could feel, oh, I have to be careful because he's got a new family and a lot of problems. And I said to him, Joe, do you see the rain just start hit the windscreen? As he stopped the car, the rain, I thought it was amazing. The car stopped and the rain came on the windscreen exactly at the same time, almost converged. Because I was quite open, I could sense what was going on. And I said, that's wonderful. And he just looked at me, just screwed up his face. He says, what are you talking about? He just had his anger, his fierce, as if I was threatening his view, you know, what was going on, his mental process. I am me, this is my problem, this and that. So, is that a good feeling to sense that and to see that people lack that mindfulness, or that's, you know, always getting caught up, the old charcoal marble, you know, like that.
Well, I mean, that's what the world samsara is about.
Yeah.
That's why they war and all that. It's a vicha bhaja sankhara. And, you know, how do you get out of that? Of course, mindfulness is the only possibility. You know, then there's like United Nations or peace conferences. You know, there are attempts to try to solve worldly problems, but they're not getting to the real problem. It's the avijja. So, you know, like you're getting to the root of the problem, but most people don't have a clue. But sometimes, you know, just a few words people can suddenly awaken to something. So don't despair, but I mean, you know, but also don't expect them to understand what you're talking about.
Just stop there.
Yeah.